This is Katherine Jenkins, your host of Mother's Yes, here on Radio CorMariae. And today I have with me Robert Joyce. He's the president of the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund. So thank you, Bob, for coming on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Catherine. It's very nice to be with you.
So first, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund is?
Sure. The Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund, which we refer to as PLLDF, is a nonprofit organization in Massachusetts which was formed back in 1975, shortly after the Roe v. Wade decision. And it was a group of volunteer attorneys who have gathered to devote their time and effort to promote respect for life and to defend the right to life of all human beings, whether they be born or unborn. And we've been doing that for over 40 years now. We appear in court representing the pro-life cause and pro-life persons. We appear before agencies, and we're basically a group which tries very hard to promote the truth, just like other pro-life advocates, and we understand how important it is and how difficult it is to establish the truth. You know, it was said, I'm not sure who, but someone said that the degree to which truth is evident in a society is related directly to the courage and the faith of the people, and that means the courage to discover and to defend the truth, and whether that's comforting or whether it's disturbing truth, and the faith that the laws and people will treat the truth fairly. So with that guiding principle, we try to apply facts to law and to protect innocent human life wherever we find it.
Wow, thank you for doing that. What are some of the cases to help me get a good feel of what you guys do in the courtroom?
Well, we've defended pro-life advocates, sidewalk counselors, for instance.
Oh, wow.
We have protected people who are facing the end-of-life decisions. We have appeared not only in the trial courts but in the appellate court. Most recently, we had a great success before the United States Supreme Court in the buffer zone case, the case that's known as McCullough versus Coakley, and that was a case where Massachusetts had a law which kept pro-life counselors 35 feet away from abortion clinic entrances and exits, and really nullified the effectiveness of their counseling efforts. Mm-hmm. That case was challenged in federal court here in Massachusetts, and it was a 7-year battle. And we lost 4 times in the federal courts in Massachusetts before the district court and before the Court of Appeals. But fortunately, the Supreme Court took the case. Wow. And that was argued, and we obtained an 8-0 unanimous decision from the Supreme Court, protecting the pro-life counselors, and so that was a great victory. But it's a costly victory in the sense that it takes so much time and effort to defend this innocent life. And the sad thing is that we know that while the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was denying the free speech rights of these pro-life counselors, we know that the cost of that was the lives of innocent human beings. So that was one thing. That was one case that we did. We've also been involved recently and over time with efforts to compel the Massachusetts General Hospital to render care to its patients who wanted care, but for whom the care was denied by the hospital through a committee that's called the Optimum Care Committee. It's almost an Orwellian type of title because the optimum care in these cases equals no care. In other words, the best thing for you is not to receive care at our facility. And we've had to go into court and to obtain injunctive relief compelling the Massachusetts General Hospital to provide the care to people who want the care. Shockingly, now, in the course of our most recent case, we came upon a study that that was published at the American Thoracic Society International Conference in 2014, and it said that this do not resuscitate policy, this unilateral do not resuscitate policy, in other words, a do not resuscitate order against the will of the patient, had been applied 147 times
Wow.
by Massachusetts General Hospital. And that, shockingly, in 41% of those cases, the denial was for conditions other than end-stage conditions. In other words, they were for cases that were deemed reversible. So this is a real crisis that we're looking at.
That's crazy. Is it for
yes,
the elderly mostly that they're doing this?
It's for the elderly or people who are, for instance, the first case we had was a fellow who was about 75 years old. The second case was a person who was only 66 years old.
Wow.
And fortunately, in each case, we were able to obtain adjunctive relief. But this is a real threat. And we also are involved in other cases. For instance, we wrote briefs in the Hobby Lobby case, which was a United States Supreme Court decision, which recently protected the rights of Christian owners of a closely held corporation to refuse to participate in the provision of what they call abortifacient medications for their employee benefits. And interestingly, our brief was cited twice in the Supreme Court case, and we had a brief that we submitted on behalf of the Little Sisters of the Poor at the U.S. Supreme Court. And
so you got involved in that case?
I'm sorry?
You got involved with the Little Sisters of the Poor?
Yes, we filed a brief in that case, yeah.
Wow.
And I'd say that, interestingly, law students were involved in the preparation of both of those briefs. So Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund provides a great opportunity for law students to get involved. We had a case recently where the 40 Days for Life was denied the right to participate in the Norwood Day, and we established contact with town officials and with town council for the town of Norwood, and we explained the constitutional provisions involved with free speech, and we were able to come to a resolution which allows 40 days to participate in all future events.
Wow.
And,
was it like a parade or?
It's a day that they have on the town common, and there are booths set up by various interests. So it's a nice day for the community to get together and to find out what other people in the community are doing. And we certainly didn't want the Right to Life message to be excluded from that, even if some people find the message uncomfortable.
Right. Wow.
So those are some of the cases that we have worked on. It's interesting, Catherine, this is a very difficult issue for so many people to deal with. It's uncomfortable, and it's one that there's a natural impulse to kind of shy away from, and that's true in the law, and it's also true in everyday life. I've been told by a number of people that the issue of pro-life is off the table for discussion at various venues, and you can understand that because people are very uncomfortable with it. I mean, here in Massachusetts, we've had more than 1,200,000 abortions performed since Roe v. Wade, and that's enough to fill Fenway Park 35 times with unborn lives. And so it's a difficult thing. There are many families that have been affected by this, and what we have to try to do, whether we're in a courtroom or whether or not we're in a legal setting or just in an everyday setting, is we have to find a way to respectfully introduce the topic for discussion, and because that's the way that you change public sentiment. And public sentiment, as Abraham Lincoln said, is more powerful than statutes and more powerful than case decisions, because with public sentiment, those cases can be won, and with public sentiment, those laws can be passed. So it's a challenge to each and every one of us. But
how do we go
it?
about doing that? It's scary. We're all scared to do it.
Yeah. So anyway, I've come up with something that I've sent out to people who I know. I send it out by email as a hope of promoting discussion, and I use it in a modified fashion when I speak with somebody. Let me read it to you and see if you find it helpful. Let's see if any of your listeners might find it helpful, just as a means to open up a pro-life discussion in a respectful way. So I write an email that goes like this. I believe that an important goal of respectful dialogue is truth, and that justice requires truth. In the hope of doing my part to create a just community, I would like to share a thought with you. So this is some language that I find helpful when I try to initiate a pro-life discussion in a respectful way that does not make a person uncomfortable. So I say or write something like this. I believe that an important goal of respectful dialogue is truth, and that justice requires truth. In the hope of doing my part to create a just community, I would like to share a thought with you. I hope it won't make you uncomfortable. If it does, and if you want me to stop, just let me know and I will keep quiet. I'd like you to know that I believe our laws should protect human life from conception through natural death, and that I am willing to discuss this with you, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with my belief. Can we talk? And I find that works about 20 or 25% of the time. It
awesome.
Opens up a discussion.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would you say to the person when they respond with, but I think, what are you going to do for those children? For example, like when they go, like they're upset right now because of the laws that are passed about funding birth control overseas. And recently I had a friend say, well, what about all the children in the orphanage? What are you going to do to help them? And they're just left there. And so they kind of have this attitude where if we can't take care of them, then they're better off not born. Or at the end of life, they believe in euthanasia if they're not being taken care of properly.
Yeah. Well, I think that the answer to that is that we have a lot that we have to learn and that we have to appreciate and we have to accept about what love is, and what the demands and what the rewards of love are. So it is true that at least in this country, there are many more people who want to adopt these unwanted children than there are unwanted children. So that we have to acknowledge that adoption is a viable alternative. But most important, we have to somehow get people to understand, and I think the dialogue and respectful, loving dialogue is the way to go, for them to appreciate that what we're talking about really is a human rights issue, and it's about women's health. I say it's a human rights issue because even from a scientific point of view, we know, because of advanced technology, we know that from the very earliest stage, from fertilization, we have, from a scientific perspective, a whole new integrated organic human being. It doesn't need anything more in order for its life to continue other than protection, food, and shelter, just like a newborn baby. So, and the science shows us that we have a new technique. We have a new technology that's out on the market now that is called contact embryoscopy, and that allows us to visualize the developing human embryo from the very earliest stages, and we can see. Right now, today, we can see with the click of a mouse, on an app, on a free app, we can click on to six weeks of the pregnancy. That's basically when the woman has just missed her second period, and we can see a human beating heart, red and pumping at 113 beats per minute. We can see it. It's right there. It's evidence. and it's evidence of the humanity of the child. And so we have to basically say that this is a human rights issue, that these are undeniably human beings, and the question is whether or not we are going to allow the termination of them simply because they are small and they're weak and they're dependent and they're voiceless.
Right.
And from a human rights perspective, no, you can't do that. So that's what I think we have to do. We just have to look people in the eye, answer those questions, say this really is a human right, and yes, there are problems, but the power of love is greater than many of us appreciate, and we should give it a chance, that we can love both the woman and the unborn child. Love isn't limited to one or the other. We can love them both. That's what famous Dr. Wilkie and his wife used to say when they were advocating pro-life throughout the country and the world.
That's my passion, is supporting the mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's the way we can help the children, is by helping the mother.
Yeah, and mothers, some mothers feel, I think, an undeserved guilt about their abortion. And why do I say that? Because in the law, there's a concept that's called mens rea, and it's Latin, and it means a state of mind. In other words, a guilty mind. And many women, maybe most women historically, who have had abortions, and men who have encouraged them to, parents or grandparents who have encouraged them to, they simply have not known the science and they haven't been fully informed about really what they're doing. They've heard this clump of cells argument, and they've bought it. And so it isn't like they went into it with full knowledge, and therefore their guilt is in many cases unwarranted because they haven't been properly informed. It's interesting. We are currently dealing, the PLLDF, together with a group of women called AUWL, the American University Women for Life. It's a group of professional and non-professional women, nurses, educators, mothers, who have rallied around and attempt to defend life, and they saw what is happening in our Department of Public Health with respect to abortion consent forms, and what is happening in our superior courts with respect to judicial bypasses, or the so-called Mary Moe procedures, where a minor can go into court and get an abortion without the knowledge or consent of either parent. And they saw what was going on in Massachusetts, and they stood up with us and are trying to make a change. I'll just say some of the things that bothered them and bother us. The Department of Public Health is statutorily obliged to promulgate abortion consent forms, which are instructive to the people, to give them necessary information for them to make an informed choice. Well, listen to this one. The statute in Massachusetts defines an abortion as the willful destruction of the life of an unborn child. Oh. That's the statutory definition. Now, the form that instructs or guides the pregnant woman in Massachusetts describes abortion as the emptying of the contents of the womb.
That's ridiculous. Who changed that?
It isn't changed. That is what the Department of Public Health has promulgated in fulfillment of its statutory duty. But we say, no, you haven't met your statutory duty. That's like first of all, it is true that an abortion is the emptying of the contents of the womb, but it's also the willful destruction of the life of an unborn child. And to describe it the way they are doing it is kind of like if someone said, well, tell me, please describe Michael Phelps to me. And they said, well, Michael Phelps is a person who, if you put him into a pool, he would not drown. Well, that's true. But it really doesn't tell you what Michael Phelps is all about. So we're trying to change that. And in the superior courts, this is really interesting. The Mary Moe procedures in Superior Court are guided by a statute 112, Chapter 112, Section 12S. And that allows a woman to go in and to get judicial permission in order without the consent and knowledge of a parent. Now, in order for a judge to authorize an abortion, he or she must first inquire to see whether or not the minor is mature. And if the minor is mature, then that's the end of the inquiry. Then the judge has to authorize the abortion. If the judge finds that the person is not mature, then he or she conducts an inquiry to see whether or not the abortion is in the best interest of the child. Okay, so how is this playing out? Well, we have suggested guidelines here in Massachusetts. And the suggested guidelines have been in force since 1981, and this is going to be very surprising to parents, I think, of minors. These guidelines suggest that the judge should not inquire into the minor's view as to the morality of abortion, or the view of her parents as to the morality of abortion, or whether or not she considers her fetus to be an unborn child, or whether or not she believes she is destroying life. Now, that is the case notwithstanding the legislature's definition of what an abortion is as the willful destruction of the life of an unborn child. And we say that those are precisely the kinds of considerations that a judge should look at in determining whether or not this person is mature or not.
Right.
This is the bedrock of maturity. And so we have suggested, proposed changes to that, but we've gotten short shrift now from 3 consecutive chief judges of the Superior Court. We have uncovered research which has indicated that the abortion authorizations are being granted by our Superior Court judges in 99.9% of the cases. One study reported that out of 16,000 cases, abortion was authorized 15,998 times.
Wow. How many in a year are there?
I believe there's about 600 a year. We have requested specific information from the Superior Court as to how many cases there are, what percentage have been deemed mature, what percentage have been deemed immature. Has a guardian ad litem been appointed to advise the court in any of these cases? And we've been told that the court does not keep these statistics. Well, we know they kept them for a period of time. But the American University Women for Life and Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund are trying very hard to do something about that. We uncovered other research which said that the average Mary Moe petition hearing takes only 12 minutes.
Wow.
In other words, the judges, if this figure is right, the judges are, on average, determining maturity or the best interest of an immature minor in 12 minutes. Well, you tell me how you can determine maturity in 12 minutes.
Right. And do you know the average age of the girl?
Well, there'd be any time. I would say they're probably anywhere from 13 to 18. 13 they're minors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. And have you ever seen when, I don't know if it's Lila Rose that goes into Planned Parenthood, but there's undercover videos of Planned Parenthood where they've said that they have an older boyfriend and they don't report it to these young minors that are getting statutorily raped, and they can just get an abortion, get rid of it, and then the man is not held accountable. Yes,
well, that's very true. And of a former Superior Court Justice, Elizabeth Butler, commented in the Lawyers Weekly one time when she was talking about this Mary Moe procedure, and specifically compared to statutory rape and other rape charges, where, and she said, and I'm going to quote this, she said that with respect to Mary Moe petitions, this is a quote: "The ready availability of abortion, courtesy of the court, weakens the family unit and the judicial system by permitting dishonesty, close quote. She added that the concealment of the pregnancy and the abortion widens the chasm between parent and child, rendering parents unable to understand or offer loving support to a child caught in a nightmare. She said the Mary Moe procedure does nothing to foster family interaction and, in fact, endorses a disregard for familial values. So this is serious stuff. This is real serious stuff. And we think that it should be changed. And I think that, the more, what I'm reciting now is truth, or at least it's evidence. It's evidence of truth, and it deserves discussion so that the truth can be determined, and the facts can be laid before the public. And if corrective action is necessary, which we say it is, it can be accomplished by fair-minded, responsible citizens.
Now, how do we go about changing the minds and the hearts of these judges and these people? And we're living in academia, and they think they're so smart and they know what's best. How do you deal with all these academic people every day?
Well, I think what you've got to do is you've got to first of all clarify in your own mind what the truth is. Then you've got to anticipate the arguments that they will put forth to you, and then you want to determine, well, how would I respond to that? Just advocating the truth. And what you'll find is that the more you, the closer you get to the truth with a person, whether or not they're super intelligent or super educated or this sort of stuff, the closer you get to a truth that they do not want to acknowledge, the more they will try to demean your intellect or demean your efforts, and you just stand firm because you have the truth on your side, and you say, but what about this? But what about the fact that every one of these aborted human beings is a self-sustaining individual that only needs food and shelter? What do you say about that? How do you deny science?
Right.
And you just kind of stick with it, and you have the faith to stick with it. I don't know if I can have the quote right now, but George Washington one time was talking about the importance of religion and morality, and he said that it was essential to an orderly society. And he said that no matter what concessions might be made to persons with refined education or refined intellects, the truth of the matter is that public morality cannot exist in the exclusion of religion and religious principles. So what we have to do is we have to acknowledge what the power of religion is for those who are willing to listen to religious messages, and for those who are not, we have to consider what the power of science is. Nat Hentoff, I don't know if you ever heard of Nat Hentoff, but he was a syndicated columnist he was in about 200 newspapers. He died just in the past year or two. But he was raised Jewish, but he was an atheist. And he said that he found his pro-life foundation not in religion, but in embryology. And he said, he being a civil libertarian and pro-lifer, he said that the humanity of the unborn was not found in the Bible for him, but in the textbook of science.
Wow.
And he said that it was perfectly clear to him that abortions involve human beings. And he says you don't have to be religious to believe in truth and decency and honesty and integrity. So even atheists have a ground for the pro-life philosophy. I think once we engage in more and more discussions with people, we find what their objections are, we think about them, we determine our response to them, and then we have another conversation, or we apply our newfound knowledge or a newfound approach to our next conversation. And that's the process through which truth evolves. by fair-minded people having reasonable discussions and constantly marching towards the truth, which is going to be the foundation for an orderly society.
Right.
And
we have to keep stepping out, because if we don't, it's just going to get out of control. And I'm going to conclude with this article I saw online the other day, because this is just the epitome of it going out of control. The article was published in the Journal of Medical Ethics, and it said that newborn babies are not actual persons and do not have moral right to life. The academics also argued that parents should be able to have their baby killed if it turns out to be disabled when it's born. The article entitled Afterbirth Abortion: Why Should the Baby Live? In the article entitled Afterbirth Abortion, they argued the moral status of an infant is equivalent to that of a fetus in the sense that both lack those properties that justify the attribution of a right to life to an individual. Rather than being actual persons, newborns were potential persons. They explained both a fetus and a newborn certainly are human beings and potential persons, but neither is a person in the sense of a subject of a moral right to life. We take person to mean an individual who is capable of attributing to her own existence some at least basic value such that being deprived of this existence represents a loss to her.
Well, that is a beautiful opportunity for a pro-lifer to challenge and to successfully challenge the assertions that are made in that blurb that you just read, because the observation that they made were not based upon science, but rather based upon opinion. And I used to use in my summation in some cases when I was encouraging a jury or a fact finder to determine the truth, I used to say, let's suppose that there is a rose in a vase on a table, and someone comes in and points to that rose and says, that's nothing but a weed. Well, calling it a weed does not make it a weed. And then if 10 more people come in and say, that's a weed, or 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 come in and say that's a weed, well, their assertion that that rose is a weed does not make it a weed. It is a rose. The truth is it is a rose. And the truth of every unborn child and every born child is that it is an autonomous, integrated human being. And so you would attack the underlying foundation of those authors and say, basically what you're doing is you're trying to build on sand, and through your eloquence you're trying to convince people who don't know any better that what you say is true, notwithstanding the fact that it is anything but true. And you say that patiently and you say it joyfully, but you don't say it so patiently that you belie the urgency of the situation. That's the thing, is that what we're dealing here with is human life. And there's a statue down in Boston on Commonwealth Avenue. I think it's between Dartmouth and Exeter Street, and it's William Lloyd Garrison. He's the famous abolitionist. And there's a quotation on the side of it, what he had to say about slavery. And there aren't many situations in life that this quotation can be applied, but abortion is one of them. What he said about slavery is this: I am in earnest. I shall not equivocate. I shall not yield. I shall not retreat even 1 inch, and I will be heard. And that was a good approach to take to eliminate the evil of slavery, and it's a good approach to take to eliminate the evil of abortion. And I think we're running over, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to end this if you'd like.
Sorry, I'm obviously under the weather today, so I'm glad you're doing most of the talking.
I would like to close with a quotation from the Massachusetts poetess Emily Dickinson,
okay, I'd love
who wrote
to hear
a very short poem called Not in Vain. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it goes like this. Yeah, if I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin onto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. Now, every single action, every single word that is taken and or spoken by a pro-life person in defense of human life is worth it. So we've just got to go joyfully proclaiming the truth and having faith that in time, and for religious people, with God's grace, we will prevail in this struggle because it is right.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for coming on. You're very inspirational, and it's empowering to know that you can change so many lives, and we can too.
Yes,
we just have to step out, and it's worth that one heart, like that in that quote by Emily Dickinson, that if you could just change one heart, then it's worth all the effort that you put in.
So true, Catherine. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me on. May I mention to your listeners that they can find out more about Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund by going to our website, which is plldf.org. And you can learn more. And if anyone wants to call me to talk, I'm available all the time.
Wow, thank you. And also we can donate on your page too, right?
We don't have PayPal, but you got an address that you could send a donation to.
Okay,
sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob.
Wonderful. Thank you for all you do.
Welcome.